Big welcome to all of the new people that have just joined: Anna, Raquel, Jennifer, Mark, Eva, Shireen, Sharon. Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's so great to have you here today. Oh, look, everyone commenting. You've got a fellow DECIEM colleague joining us, Christina. Amazing, and it is 2 p.m. So I just want to say a big welcome to everyone to today's webinar, Why Campaign-Led Learning Sticks at DECIEM. And without further ado, I will stop talking and hand over to your hosts for today, Danny, Al, and Christina. Danny, over to you.
Thank you, Cassie. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. Great to meet you all, and thank you for joining what I'm sure is going to be a very insightful session for the next 45 minutes to an hour. So as Cassie mentioned, I'm Danny. I'm a business development manager here at Thrive, but I am joined by two much more interesting ladies who I'll ask to introduce themselves in just a second. But for anybody who's just joined in the last couple of minutes, Cassie did mention, unfortunately, Claire from Superdrug, who was originally meant to be joining us on the webinar today, can no longer make it. So we've had a last minute switch up, and we're joined by the brilliant Christina from DECIEM. So firstly, thank you, Christina. Huge thank you for that. And I think now would be a perfect time for you to introduce yourself.
Oh, thank you. It's really an honor to spend time with you. I am Christina Tsiratakis, and I'm very lucky to be with DECIEM, the Abnormal Beauty Company. We're a Toronto-based beauty brand. And we have a very special learning culture. I think it's incredibly collaborative, it's very social, and it's really driven by Thrive. So I'm excited to talk to you all about how we leverage campaigns at DECIEM to really create a lot of community and a lot of connection. So thanks for having me.
Lovely, thank you. We're super excited to have you, so thank you. And Al, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
So I'm Al Thompson, so I'm head of production here at Thrive on the content side. So I joined back in May and have been working with my peers to come up with what our vision is for content and what that's going to look like for you guys.
Perfect, thanks Al. So this webinar is all about how Christina and DECIEM have been using and used campaign-led learning and the benefits to that, along with how Thrive help encourage campaign learning through our content as well. I'm going to be posing questions to both Christina and Al and getting back what I'm sure will be some really insightful answers. And as we go through, as Cassie said, please do get involved in the chat if you have any thoughts, opinions, or questions that you'd like me to ask. I will do my very best to ask them throughout the webinar, and if there's any that we skip over, we will try to come back to them at the end as well if we've got time. So I think we'll jump straight in, and the first question, which is aimed at both of you actually, and I think I have a good understanding of what campaign-led learning is and what that means to me. It'd be great to have some opinions in the chat from everyone around what campaign-led learning means for them and their organisations. But I think I appreciate it's probably different across different organisations in different industries as well. So it'd be good, Christine, if we start with you, and what is campaign-led learning at DECIEM and what does that mean?
Well, I think it's important to know that our L&D department was actually formalized just 2 years ago. DECIEM's only 8 or 9 years old. And when we joined and we started working with Thrive LXP, the idea of campaigning was really new to me because I had never really had the opportunity to leverage campaigns in that kind of a way before. So it was like all of these shiny new tools that gave us the opportunity to create a shared experience across the organization and a shared message, shared focus on new habits, on change, on learning, on the opportunity to interact across the business. And it became really exciting because we could do that across so many different themes and basically offer either a shared collective experience, really collaborative, really communal, or even just an individual experience if somebody wanted to be directed somewhere. Sometimes it's hard to know where to look. So it's just a synchronous way to create experience, I think, more than anything.
And I think for me as well, as just appeared on the slide, so it's a focus for a period of time. I think also it's a very powerful messaging tool as well, campaigns, and almost a little bit around the storytelling is you're planting that seed. So you can get a lot of engagement, you can drip feed information out and get people sort of like exciting, what's going to happen next, what's coming. So you can, I think there's lots you can do. I think it's, I think for communication, it's really powerful if you are going through change or launching something new. It's a great way to put real sort of messaging to everyone, that everyone's getting that same piece of information. And at the same time, I think it's quite important. Yeah, I think that's it in a nutshell for me.
I'd also say it's a huge culture driver. Like it really builds culture, and it's a real change agent as well.
Yeah, and I think Steph just literally popped her message in the chat, actually, just as you were saying that, and saying to her it's a way to drive and navigate conversations and current topics. I think, Al, you mentioned it, like it can be a really good kind of communication tool. I know that we use it a lot, and I know, Christina, you've used it a lot across DECIEM as well, where people are getting involved in conversations, people are asking questions as part of those campaigns as well, and it acts as that one place for all of that information to be stored. So I agree with what Steph has said there. We've got a few more messages coming through on what people think campaign-led learning is to them. So Kevin said, for me, it's a series of learning experiences that occur over time and across different mediums that are designed to create behaviour change, which is really nice, a really nice way of putting it. I think that behaviour change piece is really important. I think it's also important to try and drive conversation and drive curiosity in a certain topic area as well. I think it's all about making learners as curious as they can be in certain topic areas. Lots of different comments coming through. Sophie says it's a way to promote initiatives, incentives, and demonstrate our culture. And Christine has said spaced learning over a period of time and is good when combined with blended learning. So yeah, I think that's a really important message, is that campaigns don't just have to be digital learning. It can be a combination of face-to-face sessions. It can be some e-learning. It can be TED Talks and videos and podcasts that you can point your learners in the direction of. So brilliant. I think we've got lots of different kind of opinions coming through. So that was great to hear from you as well. And it takes us nicely on to kind of our next question, which, Al, I know you're very passionate about these 7 steps and how we actually plan campaigns. So it'd be good to get your insights into these and what each of these steps involve, really.
Sure. So for me, it's about, what's your end result? So what is it you want to achieve? Is it an awareness piece, the behavior change? What information are you putting out there as well? So for me, typically with my project manager hat on, like to work backwards. So what is that end result? So in terms of content, messaging, the big piece, and then when do you want to put that messaging out? The second part would be, what content do you have? And when I say content, that doesn't mean actual resources. It can mean, what people do you have as well? Who can you use in terms of peers that have really good expertise, or if they're a real advocate for perhaps a value or a behavior that you want to sort of focus on? Who can you work with to help pull that together? Having a look at what other content you've already got. So have you got existing sort of PowerPoints or slides? Are there other, as we've mentioned before, TED Talks? You might be using some of our content as well to sort of really sort of build out what that sort of content looks like, so you can map out what each piece is going to be. Messaging is really key. And again, I think if you are, it's something that is change related. If you have got someone in the business that your people love and look up to, it's really good to have messaging from those kinds of people, because the audience will sort of buy into that real sort of positive engagement. Graphics and assets. We're not all lucky enough to have Cassie and designers to work with. So have a look and see what else is in the business. What collateral can you get? If you work with us, you'll get campaign banners as well. And then working out sort of how you're going to push that out. So as Christina alluded to, we've got the LXP, which works really nicely with campaigns, but sort of what other tools do you use internally in the business? We've got a wiki page, intranet, your LMS. Just a question there. How long does prepping campaign take? Depends how big it is. We were having this conversation, weren't we? How much content have you got? And I think if it's something that you need to do quickly, it doesn't take long. So if there's a change in the world tomorrow, as a team, we would get something out by Monday. Christina, you're quite good at whipping up campaigns, aren't you?
I find that planning a campaign is actually really simple. As you mentioned, you're thinking about, okay, what's our key message? How long do we want this experience to be? What are the different pieces of content? For us, it's typically blended. We want to have some Thrive e-learning. We might want to have some videos, some things that are a little bit shorter or longer. And then what additional experiences might we create around that, whether it's a little bit of gamification, it might be a challenge, some user-generated content pieces, and then how do we want to drip that in just over a few weeks in time. That said, to kind of prep that all on the back end, it's super simple. We just have a little campaign planning tool, and then we monitor it, and we'll kind of pivot as needed. We'll see what our learners are really gravitating towards, and so maybe we'll tweak our plan a little bit in real time, but it's really just a daily check-in at that point, which is just a couple of minutes that allows us to keep the campaign living and to kind of follow the direction that we're feeling from the organization. It's honestly really easy.
Yeah, I think something that's really nice to do as well is if you can ask a question as part of your campaign. So if you have done something, perhaps sent out some activities or something for people to have a look at, ask them how they feel about it, or what they're going to do differently having looked at that. Is there something they can change? Yeah. Go on.
No, I was just going to say something just come through from Christine, and actually she's mentioning that it doesn't all need to be ready at once. Like you can keep developing it as you progress. So you could start a campaign and you could implement different things throughout it. And Christina, I think one thing you mentioned there around like actually it doesn't need tons of planning. Like you can set these up quite quickly. And I think these 7 steps can look quite daunting, but actually the fact that it doesn't take too long to prep feeds into what Claire said previously around. So Claire mentioned that with lots of activities happening across the business, it gives us focus on the current key topics to encourage behavior change. I think that links in that actually you can run multiple campaigns across the business and you can share them with different audiences. Not everybody has to see the same campaign. And I know that I think we had a brief chat yesterday, Christina, around there are some universal campaigns out there like Black History Month and Pride Month and Learning at Work Week that, yes, you might want to roll out across the entire business. But then there are internal campaigns that might only be specific to certain audiences, right?
We definitely do that specifically with our retail and our production population, because sometimes there are different changes happening in the organization and we want to make sure that they have a unique experience. And something else we'll do, especially with those teams, is we'll partner with some of the head ofs in those teams to actually write the messaging together. And then you end up kind of building the momentum in these fun brainstorm sessions.
Yeah.
Even though you plan it, what I find ends up happening is like, I'll be brushing my teeth, 2 days into the campaign, this other idea comes through. Momentum builds as the collective energy builds. And then you really start to think of more ways to keep it social and interactive. And I always find the end result of the campaign is actually different a little bit than what we thought, similar to Christine's point. Like you just keep building it. And that's the coolest part of it, that it's an evolution and it keeps getting better, I find, as it goes along.
I think, do you find when you sort of think of something else to engage activity, that almost if you put something in there that's unplanned and a bit spontaneous, people will be like, oh,
yeah, I think people love that element of surprise. We do too, though, because that the creative spark that I think happens with campaigning. We also crowdsource some of those ideas too on Thrive. So we might put an open question and let our people help kind of co-create that campaign with us. So there's a lot of ways to make it super collaborative and to really get everybody involved, which I think is why they work so well, because it's an experience. You're not a spectator to the campaign. You're really a part of it as much or as little as you want to be, which makes it fit really nicely into the flow of your work day. Whether you have a little bit of time or you have a little bit less time, you can just have the level of experience that you're looking for.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that message around like keep it fun, like keep your campaigns fun, get the right people involved, have those brainstorming sessions. Which segues really nice, Christina, actually into the next question, which is all aimed at you and DECIEM, and how has the campaign-led approach worked for you?
I mentioned to you earlier that we're only 2+ years old at DECIEM in terms of having a formal L&D department. And taking this approach of really leading with campaigns, our very first campaign was Thrive is Live. And it was really all about getting people into the habit of using Thrive and learning how to learn at work consciously. And I think starting especially with that foundation and bringing in so many different diverse campaigns, whether they're about kind of what we consider traditional upskilling or some of the more humanistic elements, things that are really important, sensitive topics, things that are really essential to the business. I think it's really taught our people to get involved and to really be active in their learning experience. So I can say, like, it's really built the culture of learning at DECIEM in an incredible way. And 2+ years in, the engagement that we have on campaigns is still as strong, if not stronger, than when we launched, which is kind of amazing. You know, sometimes you launch a tech and it doesn't sustain, but for us, that momentum has continued to grow. And I would say it's created a global room, which I think is the coolest thing. It doesn't feel like there's DECIEM in Canada and DECIEM in England. We're one global DECIEM family. And I think that's the coolest part of the community that campaigns build.
That's amazing. I love that it's completely transformed almost that learning culture within the business. And one thing that you mentioned there around, like, it's a sustained period, and I guess that's the key to campaigns. It's around bringing those topics into the organization and bringing them to the attention of your learners over a sustained period. And usually they are shorter periods of time than like a full learning pathway. Have you found that the engagement stays quite high throughout those campaigns?
Absolutely, because you're spacing that content as well, or you're bringing in new challenges or new interactions. So I think as long as you're keeping that element of suspense and surprise, you're also giving people the time, because if you only run a shorter campaign, maybe people are just having a really busy couple of days. So you're giving them the time to think about it, to have that area of focus in their consciousness, and then to kind of come back to it in that moment where they have a moment and they can really experience it. That said, sometimes we'll run a flash campaign or we'll toggle between a couple of campaigns. This campaign here was a campaign that actually Shireen worked on as well, around mental wellness. And we were bringing content in continuously over time. But sometimes we would do a little flash broadcast, or we would sort of switch back to this as our foundational campaign, layering in some other elements. So over the course of a few months, we really embed this mindset of wellness and what are you doing to take care of your wellness within the organization. We'll do a lot of things like talking points and trigger questions and things that not only help you have a digital experience, but to really bring that then into the organization in your one-on-one with your people manager or in a team meeting. So thinking about like the ripple effect of the content through other ways that we can drive experiential learning and engagement, I think makes a difference over time as well, because you can bring it from knowledge into sort of application in the workplace.
Amazing, thank you. Al, is there anything you want to add to that around some of the campaign-led approaches we've been using?
I don't think so. I think I agree with what Christina says. Obviously, these guys have just, they live it and breathe it, and so it works. But I like the surprise element. It's a bit like when the fire drill goes, right? You're a bit like, oh, but it's good because it means you take notice. And I just definitely think it's the way to go.
Brilliant, thank you. And then moving on to the next question, which arguably for me is probably one of the most important questions around how does this help learning stick? So the whole point of a campaign is that we want the learning to stick with our learners and our users. Essentially, we want them to take that knowledge away and we want them to retain that knowledge over a period of time. This question is probably aimed at both of you. And Al, I don't know whether you want to touch on some of the stuff we've been doing first. Then Christina, we can hear about how it's kind of made it stick at DECIEM.
Sure. So I think if you're putting content out there that people are going to discuss, you need to make sure it's relevant. So if it's something that's happening in the world or something that's happening in the business, people are going to automatically connect to that. I think the benefits as well of the campaign is that sort of spaced repetition. So you're sort of drip feeding it out, and it's a bit like, to me, if you know, everyone remembers being at school, you know, you cram before exams, you know, your post-its everywhere and things like that, and then you could forget everything that you've learned, regardless if you've passed or failed. I think that the storytelling as well, the more you sort of you build on that content each time. So whether it's an activity or a discussion or a resource, each time you're just building a little bit more, and building that sort of puzzle. Definitely the buzz bit as well, like create excitement, like what's coming, what's going to come next, a bit like a soap opera, right? Like doof doof moment. So something ends and you're like, oh my god, tomorrow what's going to happen? So that kind of just real sort of engagement, and again, like the normalizing participation, I think as well is important. Like you, for your culture now, it's like, this is where you go, this is what happens. And I also think maybe more about subject areas as well. It's not just the learning stick, but making sure that people realize that it's okay to do things differently or think differently, that perhaps there are other ways to behave or the impact that they can have. So perhaps certainly topic areas where people might not feel comfortable talking about things, like something that we're really, really passionate about is changing that, and we use campaigns and content to do that too.
I totally agree with that, because it gives people an entry point into a topic that maybe they didn't think traditionally might come through in the workplace,
or you wouldn't look for,
or you exactly. And so it holds up a mirror to the organization and what the organization values, and then also like nurture some seeds of change as well to help bring in new habits and new behaviors. I think, you know, not everybody intuitively might feel comfortable to talk about certain things, or even to bring certain things up with their people manager, or to bring their whole self to work. So I think we found that especially the human focused campaigns have really changed the types of conversations that people feel safe to have within DECIEM. And then the other thing that I think we've found is it takes the noise out sometimes. So if we're having a campaign on a certain theme in leadership, or something that's going on in the organization that we really want to make sure everyone uses their precious time to focus on, it helps people know where to look. And people need that, because time is scarce and it's precious and everybody's fighting for it. And sometimes they want that. They want to be self-directed, but within a framework. They want some guidance, and we find that all the time.
You can give a gentle nudge.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's helpful for people, and it empowers them. And then the fun stuff just teaches them that they're a part of it. That actually we're not just pushing things out in a one-sided way. That they are part of the story, and they just like a choose your own adventure. They get to change it along with us. And that just creates those habits, because it's active versus in a passive experience.
And do you think it's fair to say, on your instance of the LXP, people will share what they're doing, and so they're starting to learn from one another just by having the conversations on there?
Absolutely. We'll do a lot of social questions, best practice sharing, and it's an easy way to trade that. And some people will comment. Some people might want to create a video or an infograph or those types of things. But we teach everybody at DECIEM that they're both a learner and a teacher, that everybody is a teacher. And it's empowering, because they get to trade that information and be actively part of the conversation, use their voice. And I think sometimes, especially in larger companies, people can feel really disconnected from the office environment, and they want to be seen, but they're also a little bit scared. They don't want to feel embarrassed if they post something. And so for us, campaigns create a framework for psychological safety and for interaction that it's just very welcoming, and it's not scary at all, which makes them, I think it's one of the reasons people engage with them so much, so consistently.
Absolutely. Sorry, go on, Christina.
COVID, like, the campaign saved them. Like they said, like, in times of loneliness, like that was where they found community, through being able to interact with campaigns. We got so many emails about that. So I think it's just a connector as well.
I think that's such a powerful message, isn't it, around like how a campaign can really focus people in certain areas, and going back to it's that gentle nudge and just nudging them in the right direction of where they can find all of this almost support in certain topic areas as well. And then just going back to your point, Christine, around like user generated content. I know on the DECIEM platform, you're huge advocates of user generated content, and not just from being able to, for the learners to be able to feel involved in that campaign, but also in terms of the engagement that content gets. Do you find that user generated content does seem to get quite a high engagement as well?
Oh yeah, people love to either create their own content or post content. That's really been impactful and inspiring to them, especially with the app. It makes it super easy to do that. So people definitely enjoy that experience. But what we try to create is a holistic experience that anybody can have what they're looking for. If they just want to view content and maybe post something, they can have that journey. If they want to be more active, we'll create those call to actions and those nudges, so that it's sort of a sliding scale that people can do as little or as much as they want to. We always try to think that through when we're creating different activities so that we can cater to a diverse population globally, and also just within different business units with different constraints. And then we kind of just follow the leads, like, you know, what's working, what are people digging. Something I'll say is we have a call to action called Who Wants to Come Drive Thrive, and we invite all of our people to come and lead a campaign, and we'll work with them if they have a campaign idea. And we've had some really cool like crowdsourced campaigns, which how cool is that? You know, if you're in an environment, now you get to partner with L&D and actually be the co-creator of a campaign. So it's a really fun element for collaborative learning cultures.
Amazing. I love that. And both Steph and Claire in the chat are agreeing with you around drip feeding resources works really well for them. And Claire has mentioned that it helps users understand the relevance and importance for their role and business, the way that way they're more engaged and invested in the learning, which I think relates really well around like making people feel invested in the campaign and making them feel like they're a part of it as well. And one thing that I just thought of, which goes back to, I think it was Christine's comment around like being agile and being able to change the campaign as they progress. One conversation that I had with an organization around campaigns was that it allows the business to understand where knowledge is dropping off, and then allows them to almost amend that campaign slightly or push extra resources out. And they do it in what they called moments of truth. So they didn't have assessments or quizzes as part of the content or at the end of the content, because they know that the knowledge is going to be at the highest at that point. They waited maybe a couple of weeks or a month and then rolled those assessments out and those quizzes so that they could understand where knowledge was dropping off, and then drop new resources into their campaign, which I think is a really powerful way of using those campaigns as well, and just relates back to Christine's comment about being agile and being able to change them as you go. So thank you for that.
We describe it as just continuous micro learning, right? So it's now, but it's continuous over time. So you really do see the change come through. I like that. Moments of truth. Pretty cool.
Yeah, I quite like that. It stuck in my head. So moving on to the next question, and again, quite an important one around like how do you approach filling content gaps? So I imagine we have all looked to run a campaign or roll content out across our organizations and then found actually we don't have any content in that particular area. Al, I know it's something that we work closely with our clients on, so I don't know whether you want to touch on kind of how we approach filling content gaps, and then I know, Christina, you've got some insights around like storyboarding and asking questions and experimental learning as well.
Yeah, so typically for us filling content gaps, it's more of how we fill them for our customers. So we would typically work with SMEs, sometimes within a customer organization or external, or sometimes it's subjects that we research ourselves. And we would then, again, storyboards and have a look and check whoever the stakeholders were, whether it's internally or externally, is this what we want? And then we would build and release it. But again, slightly different because we have a team to do everything for us. So maybe one for you.
Sure. Well, first we'll start with what we have sort of off the shelf. So we're definitely going to look at our Thrive content. We'll look at any of our other off the shelf content, and look at a blended selection. So we want to have some e-learning, some videos, some job aids, just thinking about time and who our different sort of end learner is. And then once we start to map that out, we're going to think about, well, what do we have in-house as resources? And then with a social platform, you can also pull from TED Talks and other things like that. We think of people as content as well. So now in terms of the why of this campaign, who's our role model, who's our sponsor that we want to get involved in this, or who's our collaborator that might actually help us curate things. So if we do a campaign on sustainability or social impact, probably going to work with members of that team. Our ERGs actually curate a lot of content for us for campaigns. And when we start to map that out, we think about that as sort of the formal E of education. So now how are we going to weave experiential and exposure-based learning into it through activities, questions, best practice sharing, and then we have to gamify it all. So that's sort of where we stand back and we look at the storyboard, and then we pivot, because as we start to load it, we look at what's being consumed more. So we might not use it all, we might. One tip I'll say is we load it as individual components, but we kind of think of content like Lego. We want everything to live on its own, but we also want to build a tower. So we'll also load it into a cumulative pathway. So if anybody couldn't find those individual components, we now have a legacy campaign. So it all lives collectively, so that maybe a new hire who comes 6 months later could also experience that same campaign. So we do it both ways. We try to slice it every way we can so that everybody can have the experience.
I like that. So people can go and find those individual resources if they want to, or they can be a part of a wider pathway or as part of a wider campaign, which I think is really useful for learners. They've almost got that two-pronged approach to find content in the right place at the right time. And I really, do you, Christina, do you have kind of experts across the business then that you would go out to if you potentially feel that there is a gap in a certain area? Do you have experts that you'd reach out to maybe post some user-generated content or create a piece of content that you can roll out?
We definitely have our super learners and collaborators across our 3 learning pillars. So for product and brand, we have experts definitely in the retail space that are super passionate. For our human and leadership skills, we definitely have experts in our ERGs, or as I mentioned, in diversity and sustainability. We work closely with our DEI board, so they've curated content for us as well. But then we often just will send call to actions. I might post a video on Thrive saying, if anybody wants to get involved, like, come and join us. We really want people to be part of the experience. And I think most importantly, we get a lot of sponsorship from our senior leaders as well. And their involvement, I think, really helps to enable that change. And so they'll curate resources for us or create videos as well.
I love that you put it much better than me, better than experts. I love that you call them super learners and collaborators. Much better way of saying it. So moving on to our next questions. This one's all around, like, how do you ensure learning? Well, how do you activate learning? How do you ensure that learning is well received or outcomes are being met? So I think this one's aimed at both, because obviously, Christina, I know you'll have experience of it from the campaigns and content that you've rolled out at DECIEM, and Al, I know that you're super passionate about making sure that our content links to things like outcomes as well. So Al, let's go with you first.
So I think for us, how do we spark it? It's a little bit of thinking about what rather than objectives. Certainly with our content, it's thinking about the behavior change or the mindset change. How do we want people to feel after they have used a resource and they've reflected on what they have just seen or heard or read? And from that, what might someone be able to do? So if they're going to think or feel differently, what could they try? Something that we are working on at the moment is learning pathways with our content. And by pathways, I mean not the functionality on a platform. It is that learning journey of what that content could be look like. So similar to the content filling gaps, it's pulling that all together So for example, if you are a new starter, what would be really, really useful? So you could say that maybe DECIEM would have their own sort of like intro video, which is great. And then we know that we're working on something that's like personal brand. So that would be really useful, and pulling that content together. And also I think it's thinking about what action can be taken at the end. So we don't have assessments within our learning, but it could be things like, now go away and find like a yellow brick or whatever. So, you know, it's about taking something away. But for us, it's always at the start, what is it we want people to do differently? And that real sort of reflection piece.
Yeah, starting with what is it that you want to achieve to begin with, and then the content almost builds itself around that.
So I guess as well, if it's product knowledge, we know that we want people to be able to go away and talk to people about that product inside and out. But if it's something where we want people to consider how they're going to go and talk to someone, you know, that's sort of slightly different. But again, it's always making sure that it's relevant, and that it's set out to sort of change behavior or mindset, rather than you will go away and you will now know this. It's about how to use it in a really waffly way, I think.
No, I totally agree with you, because for us, it's all about learning and practice. So the outcome for us is the engaging. That's the most important thing. And I started to meditate this year. I'm not very good at it, but I'm still doing it. You know, I might think about doing the dishes while I'm doing it, but I'm still showing up. So for us, it's how can we just get people to keep showing up? So we really think about the active components, because just stringing a bunch of content together without giving people something to do, as you were saying, a way to apply it, a way to actively reflect, engage, participate, then it's knowledge, but it's not transferred in that same way. It's not in practice. So for us, we really think about how we can make that become practice. And it can be different experiential things, conversation starters, creating, piece of content, being the teacher. Gaming works. People love a fun challenge, team-based challenge, or challenges are really effective as well. That role modeling, getting some of that sponsorship really makes a difference, because people are looking around to see, well, does this really matter here? Is this the social norm? Is this what other people are doing? One thing I've learned is, if you believe in your bones that you have a great campaign, just because it doesn't fly the first couple of days, like, don't give up on it. Sometimes it's a lot going on in the business. And so just pivot, check your stats, kind of follow the data, think, oh, what could we do differently? And sometimes that little tweak, suddenly it's flying. Or maybe people just came back from a long weekend and they just had a really busy weekend. Yeah. So I think it's important to sort of trust that, or if it isn't going maybe as you thought it would, then get some feedback. Like we're all about getting that feedback, seeing what people are enjoying, seeing where we could try things differently, and keep trying. I think different ways of presenting things, different times that you might send a little release out, different types of messages, so it's never predictable. And I think that keeps it really fresh for people.
And Christina, do you get that that kind of feedback and that data from different places? So will you do things like feedback forms and ask people what their perception was of a certain campaign or certain learning content? Or do you get certain data from the platform that shows you kind of what content people are interacting with the most and at what times?
You can get all of the data. The tags that people are interested in. So whether your campaign tags are the ones that are most active, whether people are opening your releases versus getting information or content from other parts of the platform. So all of that is there. And then in terms of how the campaign is going, we'll definitely get sort of that anecdotal feedback from whoever we just happen to be chatting with, even on a Hangouts. What are you thinking about this?
Yeah.
And then we'll definitely do some of those formal surveys as well. The thing about a social platform, though, is you can also just get feedback openly sort of on the platform. You can put a little link to a Google survey question that's anonymous. So it can be almost like just flash feedback versus a larger survey that might create fatigue. And you can do that really quickly on there. So, you do that if needed. I would say our campaigns we get really strong engagement. If we did find, maybe we need to be getting some feedback, there's just really simple ways to do that.
because I guess that really helps, isn't it? Just on that piece around like how do you ensure learning's well received? I think over time, as you run more campaigns and get more data and get more feedback, you can ensure that your future campaigns are well received as you move forward. So you know that actually video content lands really well. So you can start using a lot more videos, and you know the times that people are on the platform, and you've got that anecdotal feedback. So I think that's I think data is a really powerful tool when we're trying to ensure that the campaigns and the content lands and is well received.
You can see sort of, you know, peak times people are on the platform.
Patterns.
So when you send releases at certain times or certain days, but we also see that surge when we're sending out releases or when we're sending out, we're flipping to new campaigns, that kind of thing as well. So you can definitely follow the data really easily.
And you can see who shared it with someone else, can't you?
Yeah.
So even if they haven't just sort of shared on the LXP something they put, you can see who's actually shared it and sent it to someone else. They might have seen it, but it could be they share and notify and be like, have you seen this? This is really cool. So I think that's something else that's really good.
Yeah.
That's
Perfect.
that conversation as well. People are motivated to use the resources or content.
Amazing. So if we move on to our next question, so this one is, what does human content look like? I think, Christina, it'd be really good. I know obviously we mentioned previously that you're big advocates of user-generated content, which is kind of the definition of human content. But I know that there are other ways to deliver content in a really human way. How do you do that at DECIEM?
I think it's looking at content as all the things, thinking really holistically. It's been my expression of
things.
all the things on the menu for dinner, but really thinking about, there's no division. There was never a division between who we are personally and who we are professionally, but there was an illusion that there was who we were at work and who we are in life. And one of the really beautiful things that's come out of the shift, especially the last few years, is understanding that we're one whole human, and everything that we might struggle with in the workplace, we also struggle with in our personal lives. You know, emotional intelligence isn't just for leadership at work, it's for getting along with your family and feeling balanced and centered and being self-aware and being able to evolve and grow. And so we think about everything in the human dimension that helps enable you, or that you might experience at some point in your life, whether it's areas of wellness, hardships, things that you might be going through, things that are going on in the world that of course are going to impact us. So, you know, we think about all of those things and we understand the significance of them in your workday, because it's really hard to focus when you're plagued and distressed by some of the things that are happening in the world. So how can we not bring those conversations into the organization and understand that we have to help people? It's our most important role, actually, is to help people through that. So we look at it that way. And then we also think of our humans as content would be the other thing. We really do, like, everybody's got a story, and we learn so much from one another. And so we think about that aspect of storytelling. We do a lot of real conversational sessions as part of a campaign. We might do a kickoff that's really about interviewing our people and them learning from one another. And the wisdom that comes through in that is brilliant. And it's an amazing way to learn through storytelling. So I think those are the two ways that we look at it.
I really like that, providing content that can be used both at work and in their personal lives as well. I think that's obviously how people relate to content in a much more engaging way, when they can understand the impact of that on their personal lives as well. So I think that's a really great way. And actually just thinking about everyone as a piece of content, everybody has kind of knowledge in different areas, right? So actually, if they can share that knowledge across the business in a really engaging way and on a platform that is almost that one source of all information, that's a really great way of getting authentic content out there and human content out to your learners. So amazing, thank you.
That's a really good icebreaker. You know, when you have training sessions or face-to-face, like, what animal would you be?
Yeah.
What piece of content would you be? Danny, what content are you?
I'm gonna go for I'm a podcast.
What's your message? What's your story? What's your unique journey? That thing that other people are enriched from learning about. We do something on Thrive called Coffee and Conversation. So we'll do an event, and it's just conversations with people from across the business. We'll link them to different campaigns, and there's that beautiful element of storytelling. So it's just creating the space for people to really be part of the learning culture. And if they're part of it, it's their culture, you know, and they take care of it and they're engaged in it, I think, in a different way.
Yeah, and Christina, one question that's just come through, which is aimed at you, is what's the most effective campaign you've run at DECIEM?
Oh, mama. What is the most, I mean, we've done so many great ones, but one thing I can say is we've done campaigns on learning. So we've done like how to hack your learning, learn for a cause, which was your learning. We donated, we planted trees. Some of the campaigns that we do around how to learn, where we're teaching people sort of the why and the how to learn and helping them choose learning. Those have been really, really effective ones because they teach people the habit. So I would say those have been big ones. And then people they care about the organization too. You know, they want to learn about what's going on in the business. So when we have some of those ones, it piques people's curiosity and they really want to, they want that communication, because for us, Thrive is a learning and a comms platform. So those ones always have kind of sustained engagement. But I would say the learning campaigns have been really, really effective.
Perfect. Then Kevin, I think Al, this one's aimed at you. So how does Thrive help with our internal campaigns?
So a bit like what's on the slide at the moment, we work with sort of a global campaign calendar. So we work a lot with awareness weeks. So our next one is Baby Loss Awareness Week in October. So what we'll be doing is we will be creating content around that, which will be raising awareness, but secondly, signpost people to support. So in terms of how we could help you, we create resources that you can use. We can share how you would perhaps structure a campaign. So we will sort of do all of the design work and everything for you, so you can sort of take that away and apply it. But we're super passionate as a company for approaching content and campaigns that support that others perhaps won't. You know, the things that people feel quite awkward to talk about, and you know, take away that feeling of you can't talk about it, and encouraging people if they want to talk and share, because actually you don't know who else has been through the same thing. So and alongside that, actually just sort of ways how you can help people, or what's the right thing to say, or it's okay to feel sort of slightly clumsy and awkward, but try not to say these things, you know. But yeah, ultimately we provide the resources for you and the support and help of how best to use them.
Perfect. And then one final question that's just come through, which is from another anonymous attendee. And I think this one's aimed actually at both of you, really. Just around any tips on how we can react faster to campaigns.
In terms of creating them, or in terms of using them? Or maybe we could answer both.
I think answer both if you can.
So in terms of if you want to do something quickly, I would again have a look. You know, if it's something you want to take action on and send something out, what have you got? What have you got that you can use? What's that message going to be? If you know what the message is, then, and you've got someone in the business who's like a real sort of key person, you could do like a flash forecast.
You could do, if there is a current event, I mean, it really depends on your technology too, because for us, if there's something that's pivotal, we'll usually go to whether it's our Thrive e-learnings, we can leverage some of the tools that we have. But depending on what technology you have and what you can integrate from off the shelf or sort of external content, one thing you can do is create simple educational videos every day. So, and those videos can connect to one another. So whether it's 10 days that you want to campaign on something, you could have a simple 3-minute message. There could be a call to action at the end of it, or an area of focus, and you can just create those in real time. I think one of the gifts of COVID is it's totally normal now to, you don't have to be in the studio. And so we've done that. So all you really want to do is sort of draft your overall messaging and maybe map out some of those those placeholders, but then you just create that content morning over morning in real time.
Yeah.
And I've done that before for things that we've had to pivot quickly, and it's worked super well. So I think just jumping in and realizing that the doing actually doesn't always take as long as you think the planning does. You'll end up seeing it can be quite simple, I think, to manage it and to keep moving it as the days pass.
Perfect. And I think just on that one as well, and Al, you touched on it. Actually, look and reach out to some of your providers that you're working with. I know that obviously at Thrive, all of our clients gain access to our campaign calendar, where we develop banners and resources around campaigns that happen throughout the year. Or if you want to spend a little bit of time internally, maybe look at creating your own calendars so that you know when different campaigns are coming up throughout the year. And you could do one for universal campaigns, you could do them for internal campaigns as well. We've also got a question from Valentina. So firstly, thanks for existing. We love Thrive. Greetings from Lifebox in Chile. We have a completion rate of 90%, but there are 30% of people who have never clicked on our courses. How do we generate engagement for that group?
I would say have a look at the what's in it for me piece. So really work on the messaging and engagement and comms around what the benefit is. Is there a legitimate reason that people aren't clicking on it? Is there some sort of reason? Perhaps do they even see it? Do they hear enough about it? But mainly it's like anything. Why do we open an email? Because we want to see what's in it. Like we're intrigued. So I guess it's finding out, making sure there's no problems and actually they can access it. And then just finding out, it might be that they don't realize it's important or what the benefits would be.
We think of content alongside communication to drive engagement. So depending on whether that's a unique audience group or just kind of like peppered throughout the business, I would look at who those users are and then either speak with them directly or with their people leaders if they're all kind of in a similar business unit. Like we had that challenge in the production environment. Well, they couldn't bring their mobiles on the floor. So there's a real practical barrier. And our solution was to put iPads in the production environment so that they could access the learning. They love to do the learning now. Other things that we've done is we do a monthly welcome call and we educate everybody on the what, the why, and the how of the content, or even sometimes those simple educational videos that I was mentioning can make a big difference. One thing I found though is if your comms channel is not working, try another one, right? Yeah. You can't just keep doing the same thing. So sometimes, like we've even set up tables in production and we're just campaigning, right? We're letting everybody know, hey, come, spin the wheel with us.
Come a free biscuit.
Absolutely. And so sometimes it's like really kind of practical things. I found more often than not, people don't necessarily, they just don't know where, they don't know how. And that's usually the barrier because as soon as they engage with the content, we get amazing feedback. People love it. It's simple, it's practical. But it's just figuring out what their barrier is by asking those questions, I think.
Perfect. Valentina, hopefully some of those suggestions will help you with that as well. So we keep moving on. There's just a couple more to go. So Al has been giving little snippets away throughout this webinar about the Thrive Learning content. And next week, we're really excited that we'll be officially launching our new Content Club offering. So we'll be launching this at Learning Live in London on Wednesday the 9th. So anybody that's there, feel free to pop over and say hello and have a chat. And then after that, we're going to be hosting an official launch party at Sushi Samba, which Christina will be there as well. So for anyone that would like to attend and find out more details, my details will be on the screen at the end. So feel free to reach out afterwards. But we're already working with some great brands as part of the Content Club, where they have access to all 500 learning resources that will be growing to 1,000 by the end of next year. 50 pre-built learning pathways every year where Al and her brilliant team have curated content alongside our own learning resources, assessments and question banks. We work with our clients to align our resources with your content strategies. As I mentioned previously, we have our campaign calendar that you can pick lots of learning assets up front and run campaigns across your organization. the ability to feed into our roadmaps. And this is all accessed through our brand new content hub, where you can access and download all of the learning assets. And DECIEM are one of those brilliant brands already taking advantage of the Content Club. So what kind of feedback have you had so far, Christina?
Honestly, people really love the content. I think because it's very micro, they find it very relevant. The way that it's structured is just very immediately engaging. It doesn't feel like kind of stiff like e-learning, or there's a lot of different content types. And then I think it's the themes too. Like there's just everything that anybody could be looking for as an individual component, or that you could kind of connect into a little bit of a learning journey. So we do survey people actually on the content. We get amazing feedback on it. People love to leave comments and kind of share what they've learned as well. And I will say, I feel very privileged to work with DECIEM, and I think aesthetically, we take the creative look and feel of our brand so fiercely. It was so fundamental to our founder, and we're very artistically driven. And so the fact that our creative team like gives it the stamp of approval, our graphic designers are good with our content. We know that it's very kind of cool and hip and fresh and just feels very relevant. So we love it.
I could see the smile on Al's face as you were complimenting all of the content.
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you, Christina. And that does bring us to a really nice end to the webinar. We've still got around 4 minutes, I think, before our time ends. So if there's any other questions or comments or thoughts, feel free to put those into the Q&A or into the chat. But Cassie, do you want me to hand back over to you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. That was brilliant. We've got some comments in the chat saying just a thanks for sharing your experiences so far. So thanks, Sophie, for joining us and listening to some of these experiences and lots of the stuff that everyone has to say. You're getting lots of nice, lovely thank yous in the chats, guys. So yeah, as Danny said, we've got a couple more minutes for questions, if there's any lasting questions. In the meantime, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's tuned in today. Loads of more thank yous in the comments, really valuable from Eva. Thank you from Candice. So thank you so much. And a big thank you to Christina, who has filled in for Claire today. Thank you so much for joining us and telling your story, Christina. We really, really appreciate you being here with us today. Just to let everyone know, the recording will be available in the next few days, so you will get a copy of that in your inbox. Our next live webinar session is going to be mid-September, and it's going to be all about data and how to set up an actionable data plan for success. So if you're interested in finding out how, we're going to be teaming up with Zolt from Amazon Web Services to talk with our head of analytics, Ian, all about data and how we can link L&D to business outcomes. So in the meantime, if you've got any more questions, please drop us an email. Danny has kindly put his email address up there, and we've also got our website up there. So yeah, all that's left to say is thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Awesome, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.